Hey, what's up, NBA fans? What's up, all sports fans? It's your boy right here, JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Just wanted to say and give a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shad, Kelvin, and Jermaine. And for everyone who's tuning in, I hope that you support Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, and help make this show the best that it can possibly be. I want to touch light on something. Just take a couple moments here, man. It's been an ongoing conversation that's been drummed up ad nauseum, really for the past 6-7 years, in regards to the NBA and this 24/7, 365-day debate that goes on and on and on and on, man, to the break of dawn, as they say. And I'm talking about the GOAT of the NBA. In other words, the greatest of all time, the greatest player of all time. And what I've been noticing, it's like this, man. You know, a fan like myself, I've been watching the NBA really since the late 70s when I was a kid myself. And I've seen so many great basketball players, man. You know, we're talking about 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and we had the new generation. And what these pundits and these talking heads are not understanding or not considering is how redundant this conversation is and how much of a negative impact it's having on the coverage of the league itself. The commentary is going stale, it's redundant, and they're stuck in this malaise. So what you have is like a forced conversation. And to drum up this topic day in and day out, what winds up happening is the contribution of past players, legendary players, their contributions get marginalized, discredited, and downright disrespected. And I always say, like I said, I've been a fan of a many player in a many a decade. And you do not have to be recognized as the greatest of all time to be appreciated. Every player who has ran up and down that court, blood, sweat, and tears, whether they only played 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they've all made a contribution. I'll put it this way. For the league to exist for as long as it has, really since its inception, I believe the inaugural season of the NBA, the National Basketball Association, occurred during the 1946-1947 season. And we've seen change, revolutionary play. We've seen American players, black players, white players, international players, European players, African players, Asian players, South American players make a contribution to this sport. You do not have to be viewed as the greatest ever. But when you try to push an agenda to try to anoint someone to be the greatest through a manufactured lens, well, you create an environment that becomes stagnant and the conversation becomes stale. Then really all you have left is constant debate back and forth. Eras get discredited. Well, which era is better? Or this era featured more skilled players. and it's bringing down the sport. And quite honestly, it's a turnoff for the fan who truly loves basketball, where you love and appreciate the past players. You don't want to discredit the current superstars of the previous 10 or 15 years. But at the same time, we have to move on. We have to move forward. Every generation brings forth a new cast of superstars. And it happens on 10-year intervals. But they're stuck. And you have, in this decade, so many new stars that should be given front and center spotlight, just like the stars of the 2010s had, the 2000s, the 1990s, the 1980s, the 1970s, the 1960s, the 1950s, but they refused to do it. And I think what happens is, when you don't recognize the contribution of the new generation, I believe it impacts their play. They become less confident because we're always comparing, the new cast, the new ensemble of stars to stars of the current, of the most recent decade and generation. Then we start, this guy, he played against subpar competition during the 90s. And all it's creating is this antagonism that don't need to be there. Because I guarantee you, the basketball fan who grew up watching the NBA during the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, we weren't conditioned. The commentary, we upheld our legendary players of the past. The Will Chambers, the Bill Russell, the Jerry West, the Bob Pettits, the Bob Cousy's, the George Mikan's, because they made it possible for the sport and the league to gain credibility, to become a mainstay in this culture. And that set the stage for the 70s, that set the stage for the 80s, that set the stage for the 90s, that set the stage for the 2000s. And that's why I say you can't compare eras. It's about what that player achieved during the time that they competed in the league. Now, I do believe there is a greatest player of all time, but I will not mention it in this video here, because I'm trying to condition myself to enjoy the young stars coming up, and try not to compare what they're doing versus the stars of yesterday as a barometer as to which era is the best. I believe it's nonsense. And I believe most of the people who are doing this and stuck in trying to trash the past, they can't really talk basketball. I believe that's the issue. And I believe the super team era has contributed to the malaise and the decline and the coverage of the sport, how it's presented to the new generation of basketball fans. And I believe is a disservice is being done, to be quite honest. This is the greatest basketball league ever created. Why not appreciate that? Everybody has their favorites, but there's only one true greatest player of all time, and his resume proves it, where you don't have to sit there and try to push an agenda to try to convince someone that the player that they want to anoint is the greatest ever. That it was never based on commentary or hype or trying to convince people. It was always determined on the court, just as it was in football, just as it was in baseball. So I just want to drop that nugget real quick, man. And personally, I'm tired of it, man. I just want sound basketball commentary to return, and let's enjoy the current generation of players. And maybe their behavior off the court will improve too. I believe a lot of this stuff is tied in conjunction as to how the sport is being covered. So I just want to drop that. And again, this is JB right here. Until next time, BTB, Behind the Bench.